Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the SEC Unfiltered SEC Football Game Day Show, Week 4 edition, as we get you ready for a jam-packed slate. Helping us do so, one of the best in the business. You see him everywhere, covering all things SEC and college football. Cole Cubelic of SEC Network. He's also the host of the Cube Show podcast, co-host of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning on WJOX 94.5. Again, he's doing a little bit of everything. He joins us here on this show. Cole, appreciate you taking the time, my man. It's an honor and a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So I want to start, Cole, again. You're doing a little bit of everything, man. Obviously, you played at Auburn. That's the reason we have you. Thanks to our friends at Prize Picks. We're on the SEC Unfiltered Tour in Auburn on the Plains for this game with Auburn and Arkansas. But give me a little bit of background about how the media side of things started. I saw the conversation with you and Barstool Big Cat on your platform. Great job on that conversation. But I'm sure it's a really, like when you look back on your journey, it's a really cool one when you go from obviously playing in the SEC to now covering, talking about the SEC for a living on so many different entities that you do.
That's wild. I got into pharmaceutical sales right out of college I'm old. So when I finished school, I did think that I wanted to be in media. I wanted to do it. I mean, I was that nerd that I bought the USA Today at the BP gas station by my apartment complex every morning, and I'd take it to school. I'd pull the red section out and I'd leave the rest, and I would just go through the sports box scores every morning. I listened to sports talk radio on the way to and from school every day. So that was kind of me. But when I got out of school, there weren't dedicated school websites. You didn't have podcasts. There wasn't YouTube. You didn't have conference networks. I mean, it was pretty much you had your 3 local sports guys at the sports stations on television. You had like 3 or 4 maybe television broadcast crews. And yeah, your radio broadcast crews and your local FM or AM sports radio guys. There weren't a lot of jobs out there. So I'll get into pharma sales, did that for a while, got linked up with some of the guys at the Auburn network. Actually, first I went to a guy named Steve Shelton in Huntsville. He owned a cluster of radio stations. I met him through my dad. They carried Auburn football in one of them. And I asked him if we could have a pregame show, a pre-pregame show with Ben Leard and myself, because he lived in Decatur. I was in Huntsville. And he said, sure, if you sell it. So I learned my first radio lesson right there, probably the most valuable radio lesson. And we did a pregame show, and I just kind of fell in love with it, kept doing that. That took us to Auburn. We started doing it in Auburn. A guy affiliated with the Auburn network said, hey, Stan White's moving over to radio. Do you want to do the replays for CSS, a defunct network and a defunct thought process of even doing replays for television? I did that and pay-per-view, which outside of like one Oklahoma game a year, I think is also gone in college football. So I just tinkered with it and toyed with it. I had a lot of people that gave me little micro opportunities along the way, kept kind of scratching and clawing and asking people where I could go, what I could do, did a ton of stuff for free, and just kind of ended up finding a way to get to where I am now. So it's been fun. It's been awesome. I don't feel like I'm anywhere close to where I really want to be, but it's pretty cool to think about too, that I get to do this every day for a living.
Cole, the joys and the journey, man, and certainly your journey is an inspiration. I think it's fascinating. So you do radio, podcast, and TV. Which of those would you say is your favorite if you had to pick one? Not asking you, obviously, they're all great, I'm sure, in their different ways. Is there one you prefer or like the most of the 3? Because, again, you don't find a lot of people that do all 3 of those different lanes of media, if you will.
They got studio on Monday nights, Read and React with Roman Harper on the SEC Network, too. So make sure you check that out, 6 p.m. Central each Monday. We go through all the film of the games. First off, they all kind of go together with how I prepare and what I do to get ready for them and the things that I look at and the people I talk to. But there's just nothing like being at a game. And it's nice to sit there and watch games all day. It's cool to have 4 games on at a time. It's cool to not miss any snaps, but there's still that SEC environment. There's nothing like it. So I don't think I could ever say that I enjoy any of the other entities more than covering a game, because especially with me being able to be on the sideline at those games, like I'm in it. So that's as close to being a player as I'll ever be, maybe outside of coaching or actually being an official. But I mean, I love being at games, and it comes with sacrifices. It's time away from my family. Like I said, I miss other games. We were talking about Tennessee, Oklahoma on the radio show a few minutes ago. And, Greg's like, I want to sit down and watch this one. I'm like, well, I'll be working, so I'm not going to watch that one live. But there's nothing like that. So I will always say covering games is my favorite.
Cole, you mentioned the great environment of the SEC, and let's move into the games today, and one that I'm going to be experiencing for the first time ever, believe it or not. I've never been to Auburn, Alabama, never been to Jordan-Hare Stadium, which, Cole, I learned very quickly this week. It is not Jordan-Hare. It is
Yes.
Jordan-Hare. The fine folks of Auburn corrected me rather quickly, but really excited and stoked to just experience the weekend that is in Auburn, the loveliest little village on the plains. If you're talking to me and you're giving me advice on things to make sure you catch or just things to keep an eye on, or if you can
Yeah.
explain the Auburn experience, what a game day is like, what would you tell me?
I would tell you to try to get the tumors and get a lemonade. If you can get a reservation, go have dinner at Acre. David Bancroft and those guys do an amazing job. Bow and Arrow, if you need some barbecue, go to Mama Goldberg's, get nachos, get a Mama's Love sandwich. And if you want to hang out there and have a few brews, you can do that there also, pregame wise. Just walk around some of the tailgate scenes. Near the stadium, outside the stadium. It's going to be just cool to see kind of how everybody sets up and gets ready. If you can get to Tiger Walk, I think this will probably be a pretty good one because it's not a super early game. So you'll probably have a lot of people out there. They'll be lined up. They'll be excited for that. But one thing that you absolutely have to do is you cannot miss the Eagle Fly. That is unlike anything else in college football, in my opinion. Special, unique, different, awesome. Make sure you see that. And then actually one of the cooler parts is when the band originally comes out onto the field. It's just the way that they do it, the way it's a perfect buildup to the team then coming out a few minutes later. So I know that my kids went to their first Auburn game with me for the Iron Bowl last year. We were all together, and that was one of their favorite parts. They loved it. But just once the game gets going, the things that happen in between plays, what the band does during the game, it's a unique atmosphere unlike any other.
Cole, really excited, looking forward to it. Let's talk some football. Obviously, again, we're in week 4. Cole, what are some of your biggest surprises, both positive and negative at this point in the season? Obviously, still early. We're learning a lot about these teams, but anything stuck out to you on the positive and the negative, just surprises to this point?
I think positive, how quickly Diego Pavia and Tim Beck's offense has caught on at Vanderbilt. It's a difficult offense to defend. It's one of my favorite offenses in college football. It just has answers for everything, and the defense looks different also. Probably expected more offensive lines to be better this year. That feels like it's kind of behind. And I think with that has come some subpar quarterback play from guys that we thought would take a bit of a step. Figured Brock Vandagriff would be a little bit better. I thought Peyton Thorne would have taken a step and been a little bit better this year. So it seems kind of similar to the teams, the quarterback play of we've got these super elite guys up here, and then everybody else is kind of middle of the pack, fighting, scratching, crawling to be okay. Mississippi State's offense has been a surprise, kind of the opposite direction. I thought they had some good weapons at receiver, and Blake Shapen looked really comfortable running that thing in the spring. I thought that would at least be able to go for the Bulldogs a little bit. I had concerns about defense. I knew that would take a while. The teams that are good, I pretty much thought were going to be good. I mean, I thought Missouri and Ole Miss were going to be good. I thought Tennessee was going to be good. I didn't think Alabama was really going anywhere. I think the question with them was, are we going to be talking about them as one of the best or best 2 teams in the league or one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the league? So it's probably about where I expected it. Now, people are down on Georgia now after last week, but they won the game. And last time I checked, that's what you're supposed to do at the end of the day. That's the goal that you set out for. So, I mean, they went out and did that. Tough environment to play. People don't give Kroger Field enough credit. And that's an older football team. I mean, they have proven defensive tackles, proven linebackers, a veteran secondary, and really good coaches. So I don't look at Georgia and all of a sudden say they can't play football. And Texas is probably a little further ahead than where I imagined they would be right now, even though I knew they were going to be one of the best, probably 3-4 teams no matter what. Them being number 1 in the nation and doing things the way that they have, probably just a smidge ahead of where I thought Sark's group would be.
Cole, you mentioned offensive line play, and obviously that's the position you played in college. And I always say that, we can all sit here and talk about it, but unless you played that position at the highest level, you really just don't understand what you're looking at, the intricacies and everything that goes into it. So when it comes to offensive lines, Cole, that have shined to this point, I know you mentioned there's been some that have been underwhelming. Obviously, the offensive line play has been kind of hit or miss, but have there been lines that you've been overly impressed with in the SEC that have really jumped out to you to this point?
Overly impressed with? No. I mean, it's down across the country. There are not a lot of great groups. I think Miami has a really good group. I thought Georgia did, and then actually the Tennessee Tech game was more alarming than the Kentucky game was because, like I said, Kentucky's got guys up front, and you expect them to get some wins every often. Like Deion Walker probably gonna be a first-round draft pick, so that's going to happen to you. The Texas group has been fine. The reason that I wouldn't say that I've been wowed by them is I thought they may be dominant this year, similar to LSU. I don't think LSU's group's been as bad as people think. Now, did they lose? Like, did Dillard Stewart and those guys get a couple reps from them last week? Yes, but also thought Clayton White had an amazing plan, and they were put in some tough situations. I still think that's a very good group, but they ran into a buzzsaw. I mean, that South Carolina defense plays harder than any group I've seen in college football. Like, they fly everywhere. So no, the Ole Miss group has let me down a little bit. I thought they'd be more physical. Thought they'd be a little bit better. There's just not a lot of groups out there that are great. Tennessee's offensive line has brought a little bit different level of physicality. I don't think we've seen enough for me to sit there and say this is just a dominant offensive line, mainly because of the level of opponent. But I'll tell you this, they had a couple NC State linebackers that didn't look like they wanted anymore. I can say that. So Tennessee would probably be the most pleasant surprise thus far. And Florida would probably be the group on the other end of that I thought, Florida or Auburn, I thought were going to take steps and be significantly better than last year that just have not been able to get there yet.
Cole, I'm curious, does it have more to do with, something to do with the offensive lines themselves? Is it the players on the defensive fronts are more advanced? Like, why do you think there's been such a step back?
Yeah, it's not the defensive players because we're used to having a glass eater, a war daddy, an MFer on every D line in the league. And there's not a ton of, look at LSU. Like, they don't have first round guys on the D line. Auburn doesn't have first round guys on the D line. Kentucky's got Deion Walker. Hell, Georgia's, two of their top three prospects on the defensive line were out last week. South Carolina's way ahead of schedule up front. Tennessee's ahead of schedule up front defensively. But there's not, we're used to, like, Mississippi State's got 2, Ole Miss has 1, Auburn has 3, Georgia has 5, Bama has 4. It's not like that this year. Like, Florida has 2 or 3. It's just not that widespread in the league this year. So I think the portal has a lot to do with it. There's not a lot of groups that have played 2 and 3 and 4 years together. And that's not even played and started on the field. That's practiced together, been in the meeting rooms together, watched film together, communicated together. That all plays into having a great offensive line. It's not just how many Quentin Nelsons can you throw out there. You got to know how to operate together. There's a continuity and a chemistry that comes with being a great offensive line. And I think we have seen it leads to a bigger college football issue right now, and that is depth. Like, you look at Alabama week 1, tackles out, you got to move a couple guys around, and all of a sudden, offensive line was like a liability. People thought it was going to be the best group in the league, maybe. And now it looks like something that could get you beat multiple times. Tennessee has Dane Davis that they can flail in on both sides. So, like, that's a major plus for them. Not a lot of groups have that. Auburn last week against New Mexico, a couple guys go out, and that group starts looking the way it did the year before. So I think losing a guy or having to move a guy, there's just not the solid backup that you can put in and it be a Band-Aid for a week or two. Like, now it's a bullet wound when a guy goes out, and, like, you're looking around hoping the paramedics are in the stadium because it's going to be bad. And Coach Saban told this to us like 2 years ago. We were doing a game, and I think Tom Hart said something about, 22 guys left, but they, 19, 20 of them are all, backups. And he kind of got pissed off, and he's like, listen, you got to say backups, but they've been in our system for 2 and 3 and 4 years. They know the terminology. They know how we practice. They know each other. They know how they communicate. Like, we have to retrain all of that when the new player comes in, and then try to teach them how to be a better football player. So we inherently are behind right away when that takes place. And I just don't think collectively we thought that it would put everything this far behind to this extent. So I said it before the season, and honestly, I accidentally, stumbled into this part. I said it because teams like Missouri and Ole Miss and Tennessee were going to be super dangerous with their first 22. I didn't realize that it would also hit the Georgias, Bamas, Texases maybe that hard if they lost a guy or two. And it looks like it might end up being that way. So depth, I think, that's the term for this college football season, because we're going to play more games. It's going to be a harder schedule. And whoever stays healthiest is probably going to win a national championship.
Cole, like I mentioned, we got a jam-packed Week 4 slate in the SEC. That being said, let's get into a couple of these games. Can you make picks, by the way? I don't want to compromise your professional integrity. Can you pick some games?
Not Ole Miss and Georgia Southern.
That's the one.
But
That's the
yeah, the
game you're
rest of
on.
them I'm
Okay.
fine.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
the game you're on. Awesome. Awesome. It'll be a fun night in Oxford. Well, I got 4, and none of those are included here because I think we know which one that one's probably going to go. But still, will be a good game. The Eagles are a very proud program. But I want to start the other Mississippi school, Cole, the game in Starkville, Mississippi State, Florida. This is one that I feel like there should be a Jefferson Pilot or maybe a CSS logo, like you mentioned, next to it for what this game holds. Both these teams trying to pick themselves up off the mat. Mississippi State falling to Toledo, Florida falling to A&M, and we know the situation in Gainesville. Which way do you lean in this game, and what are you looking for, again, from two teams that are just trying to have something to feel good about at this point?
Anybody who tells you that they feel like they have a good handle on what they're going to see in this game is lying through their teeth. I have no idea what this game is going to give us. I feel like Florida will probably have success running the football. What are they going to be defensively, though? Joey Slackman's out. Now you lose your best weapon at wide receiver. So is Mississippi State going to be able to stack up against the run and not have a lot of threats in other places? What's the quarterback situation going to look like for Florida? Do you force DJ Lagway in every few series, every other series? We just don't know. And then too, like mentality wise, for both programs, I think it's easy to say, where are they? What's the desire level look like? What do they want? Probably not near as bad, you would think, in Starkville right now as in Gainesville, just because they're hearing a lot of that outside noise about their head coach. I feel like Florida should win this game. I feel like Mississippi State will win this game. I think they create some explosive plays. And even if they're not able to slow the rushing attack down, they'll still get opportunities. And I'm not sure Florida's going to get a ton of stops either. And just being at home, I think, ultimately is the difference. Probably one of these games, too, that State circles and says, guys, we got to get this one because there's not going to be a ton in front of us that we feel like we're going to be able to get. Same thing for Florida, by the way. But I just don't know if they're in a position emotionally to sell that game that way right now.
Cole, let's go to the game in Como. Missouri taking on Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, because of Vandy losing to Georgia State last week, we did not get the 3-0 versus 3-0 SEC matchup. Yeah. But either way, still, an SEC contest, the SEC opener for both of these teams. How do you see this one playing out, Missouri and the Vanderbilt Commodores?
It's still a more dangerous game than people are going to give it credit for because Diego Pavia is a ball player. Like, dude's a freaking bulldog playing quarterback, ultimate competitor. And like I said, that offense has answers. The thing that you can take advantage of is a super aggressive defense. Burks at safety flies down to the box to make tackles for Missouri. They still play an attacking front that can penetrate and disrupt and get after you. And off the edge, places like that, sometimes that allows for a quarterback to be able to manipulate things and find explosive plays. Cedric Alexander at tailback's a hell of a running back. The offensive line's better. But ultimately, I think Missouri can control this game at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I think the Missouri O-line's playing great. Armand Mimbu at right tackle is probably best right tackle in college football. And they get Van Fleet back at tight end last week, and he just adds another dimension of physicality. And I'll tell you this, Nate Noel running the stretch play is freaking art. Like he literally looks like he's floating when he runs the stretch play. It's a thing of beauty. And I think they're way ahead of schedule on that specific play. And that's the genesis. Like that's the basis. That's the foundation of this offense. And Brady Cook people looked at Brady Cook's numbers and kind of pooped on him, but he hasn't had to do a lot. Like hand the ball off, force it to Luther Burden a couple of times a game, and you're good. That game wasn't as close as the score indicated last week. I mean, you have one bad snap, fumble, throw deep for a touchdown. It's like Boston College wasn't moving the football up and down the field. So I feel pretty good about Missouri, but be careful with this one because you have a guy that'll come in that gives no F's about anything that can take over a game and potentially steal one from you at quarterback.
Cool. Let's go to the premier game of the weekend down in Norman, Oklahoma. Oklahoma and Tennessee set to do battle again. Of course, Josh Heupel's homecoming. This is the SEC debut for the Sooners. How do you see this one playing out? I'm not seeing a lot of folks nationally giving Oklahoma much of a chance. Do you agree with that, or do you see it going differently?
Well, they had a chance because, number one, it's at home, and it's an awesome environment. I was able to go for the first time a couple weeks ago. Number two, they have playmakers, and I think explosive plays are going to go a long way in this game. So getting the ball to Deion Burks or Jackson Arnold actually with his legs. He did it last week, had a big, long touchdown run. He can break a defense down and provide that. The problem is Tennessee defensive line looks like it's real. And the Oklahoma offensive line's beat up, and they haven't been able to consistently run the football. So you're going to have to run your quarterback, which I don't love in a game like this. The other part is they're going to be able to apply pressure, and Jackson Arnold, outside of the quick game, has not looked great this year. I think he's 2 of 12 on balls thrown 20 or more yards down the field this season. It's like if it's out of the mesh, throw the ball like 1-2, boom, boom. He's awesome, accurate, on point, on time, understands how to change the velocity. But anything past that in the pocket, he just looks like he panics a little bit. And you can't do that against this defense. I do think Oklahoma's defense can keep them in this game. Movement has been a little bit of a problem for what Tennessee likes to do in the run game. And you have Danny Stutzman, who cleans everything up at linebacker that could, he and Billy Bowman could prevent Dylan Sampson from providing explosive plays. And I think Dylan Sampson, possibly the best running back in college football. I'm not saying he's definitely there yet, but he should be in the discussion because he's that dynamic. And he rides his blocks, presses the line of scrimmage. He's just phenomenal. Tennessee's got a couple tight ends that they can throw in there, like Kitselman and company, that can help up the physicality. We do forget sort of that Nico's only started, 4 games and never started in an environment like this. How's that going to go? We don't really know. But I think that defense keeps them in it. I think the movement, the aggressiveness up front is a little bit of a problem for Tennessee. But I think Tennessee wins it. I think they win it semi-comfortably. Like I think 10, 14 points.
Finally, Cole, the game again that we'll be in attendance to, Auburn and Arkansas at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Hank Brown's first SEC start. Arkansas is looking for that signature win early in this season after they dropped a game at Oklahoma State that I'm sure you feel like and I feel like, and they certainly feel like they should have had. So this is another one, Cole, you mentioned talking Mississippi State, Florida. Flip a coin because who knows how this is going to go when you look at it and look at the matchups. How do you see Auburn, Arkansas playing out later today?
I picked Auburn to win the game, but I think that's based on turnovers and just being at home. That stadium can provide some weird things and a little bit of magic every now and then. Taylon Green, 2 interceptions, 3 fumbles this year. Auburn has to disrupt the backfield and force him into mistakes. Now, the problem with that is if you're really aggressive in trying to do that, he can get outside the pocket and hurt you down the field, or he can leave the pocket and hurt you down the field. So contain is going to be massive for this Auburn defense. You saw some different players off the ball, played in space a little bit last week. I think that was DJ Durkin saying, all right, we have a mobile quarterback here with New Mexico, a mobile quarterback next week, a mobile quarterback in Oklahoma, and a mobile quarterback multiple times down the road. Let's go ahead and start to get ready for that. And that's why he aligned them that way to maybe get them outside the box in space where they can kind of corral some of these mobile quarterbacks they're going to see. But you're going to have to get in the backfield and disrupt. The other part is Jaquindon Jackson is an absolute hammer. You cannot let him set the tempo and control this football game. If you do we think Auburn's offense is going to be high-powered enough to just march up and down the field and score? I don't. The offensive line is not good enough to just run the football. So they're going to have to create things. I think you'll see unbalanced sets. I think you'll see some wonky formations because Hank Brown doesn't give you the mobility that Peyton Thorne did. So that's been built into a lot of what they've done. Now you have to build it out and attach some different things. New Mexico was flying down the backside of the line of scrimmage, knowing they didn't have a run threat. And they were almost making some of those plays. This team will make – Landon Jackson will make those plays. So I think you've got to find a way to keep the defense off balance from a misdirection standpoint, but not make it very high percentage plays as far as the risk involved. And Hank Brown can do some of that because he's accurate. But the other thing that concerns me is a lot of the quick throws of the perimeter last week looks late. Now, New Mexico didn't make those plays, but they were bang plays where catch, tackle, or make play on ball, even though still a reception. That's a pick against Oklahoma. That might be a pick against Arkansas. I also think Auburn's got a challenge down the field. You have 2 DBs out in this game for Arkansas. Win the contested balls down the field. Ultimately, Auburn has to get turnovers, have to protect the ball. They've turned it over 2 or more times in the last 5 games. You're at home, you can't do that. And Jarquez Hunter's got to get going. Has to get going. 20 carries last week, still not. That's not enough this week. He's got to get more.
Going to be a fun one at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Cole Cubelic, SEC Network. Again, Cole, I can't say thank you enough, man. One of the best in the business. You do an incredible job with all of your different ventures. And I know I mentioned top of show, but in case I missed anything, let folks know just everything you're doing and where they can check out all your work.
Well, I'll be on Georgia Southern at Ole Miss, 6:45 on the SEC Network Saturday night. Read and React Monday nights with Roman Harper on the SEC Network. You can catch that. 7 to 10 a.m. weekday mornings, McElroy and Cubic in the morning, JocksFM.com. It's live on YouTube. You can just go watch it there. Search Jocks945. My podcast, Cube Show, We're supposed to do it on Sundays, but these 16, 15, 13 games, I can't get it done. So usually coming out on Mondays now. After this week, we significantly go down. So we might be able to get out on Sundays after this week. But Cube Show, search that on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe. You can go catch that as well.
Y'all heard the man. You go check it out again, guys. He's Cole Cubelic. I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Enjoy the SEC football today and the college football as a whole, and we will talk to you all on the other side.